Welcome back. If you are enjoying this lesson, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel, and share it with friends for this free course on Decode Healthcare with Harshal. Today, we're tackling an absolute powerhouse in the world of healthcare administration. We're going to decode exactly how a doctor's clinical notes transform into actual, tangible hospital revenue. Now, I know that might sound like some kind of administrative magic, but there is a very strict, highly fascinating logic to the whole thing. So grab your notebooks, get comfortable, and let's dive right in.
So let's start with a really foundational question. How do hospitals actually get paid for complex inpatient stays? I mean, think about it. If you're a Medicare patient sitting in the hospital for 2 weeks, does the hospital send the government an itemized receipt for every single bandage, every aspirin, every minute of nursing care? The short answer is absolutely not. Instead, I want you to imagine a giant sorting system with hundreds of different buckets. Every single patient is sorted into a very specific payment bucket based on their clinical condition and the resources they ended up using.
And those buckets, they have a very specific name. We're talking about the IPDRG system, the Inpatient Prospective Payment System Diagnosis-Related Group. Yeah, I know, it's a massive mouthful. But simply put, an IPDRG is just a statistical system that categorizes hospital cases into groups. The core philosophy here is pretty straightforward. Patients with similar clinical characteristics should consume similar hospital resources. Because of this, Medicare reimburses a fixed, prospective amount based on that assigned group, rather than paying fee-for-service. The crazy part? The price is literally set before the patient is even discharged.
Okay, to make this dense web of acronyms a bit easier to digest, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll decode the IPDRG system overall. Second, we'll look inside the MS-DRG architecture. Third, we'll cover comorbidities and their financial impact. Fourth, crucial inpatient coding rules. And finally, we'll see exactly how documentation drives revenue.
All right, let's jump into Section 1, decoding the IPDRG system and the life cycle of a patient.
So there are 6 key stages of revenue cycle management, or RCM. It kicks off at Step 1 with patient admission, moves right into care delivery where doctors actually treat the patient, and then Step 3, discharge. But Step 4, coding and grouping, this is the crucial pivot point. This is the exact moment where pure medical data magically becomes financial data. Medical coders assign standardized codes, feed them into software called a grouper, and output the DRG, which then flows to billing and final payment. Literally, if Step 4 breaks down, the hospital just doesn't get paid correctly.
Moving right along to Section 2, inside MS-DRG architecture and how we build those payment tiers.
Within almost every disease category, the system creates 3 distinct payment tiers based on secondary diagnoses. At the very bottom, we have cases without CC/MCC. These pay the lowest base rate. In the middle tier, we've got with CC, which stands for complication or comorbidity, giving a moderate bump in payment. And right at the top, with MCC, a major complication or comorbidity. This acts as a massive severity adjustment that heavily multiplies the hospital's base payment rate. Basically, the more severe the patient's secondary conditions, the higher the weight and the higher the final payment.
But listen, to even get to those secondary multipliers, you absolutely have to nail the base category first. And this brilliantly highlights a huge trap for coders, confusing the primary reason for admission with the principal diagnosis. The primary reason is just the symptom on day 1, like say, chest pain, but the principal diagnosis, that's the condition established after study that actually caused the admission, like an acute myocardial infarction. If a coder just uses chest pain, the claim falls into completely the wrong payment bucket, drastically underpaying the hospital for the intensive cardiac care they actually provided.
Let's get into Section 3, comorbidities, financial impact, and the critical importance of timing. Enter the POA flag, or Present on Admission indicator. Every single diagnosis code submitted to the grouper must carry one of these little flags. It's basically the system's way of tracking accountability. Y means yes, the patient arrived with this condition. N means no, they didn't have it when they walked in the door. They acquired it at the hospital. U and W handle insufficient documentation or clinically undetermined scenarios. But let me tell you, that N flag, that is the one that keeps hospital administrators wide awake at night.
Here's why it's such a big deal. An N flag acts as a direct financial penalty. Say a patient is admitted for one thing, but develops a severe condition, like a deep vein thrombosis, a DVT, 2 days later. That gets an N flag. Now, even though a DVT is normally a major comorbidity that would bump up the payment tier, Medicare's rules step in and say, nope, this is a hospital-acquired condition. The system literally strips the financial weight of that comorbidity right away, and the DRG payment does not increase one bit. Quality of care is directly, permanently tied to cash flow.
All right, Section 4, crucial inpatient coding rules and making sense of all those alphanumerics.
When you look at an ICD-10 CM diagnosis code, you realize pretty quickly that these aren't just random letters and numbers. It's a highly structured language requiring maximum specificity, all the way up to 7 characters. The first 3 characters give you the broad category, something like diabetes. But as you move to characters 4, 5, and 6, you're defining the etiology, the anatomy, the severity, like adding with hyperglycemia. The 7th character defines the exact encounter type. If a coder uses a generic 3-character code when a 7-character specific code exists, that claim is either getting denied or grouped completely incorrectly.
And you know, that exact same strict logic applies to inpatient procedures under the ICD-10 PCS system. Every single procedure code is exactly 7 characters long, acting like a really strict mathematical formula. You need the section, the body system, the root operation, like are you excising or extracting, the exact body part, the approach, was it open or percutaneous, the device used, and finally a qualifier. Missing just one incredibly precise surgical detail, like whether an approach was laparoscopic versus open, will totally invalidate the code and potentially disrupt the entire DRG grouping.
Finally, Section 5, how documentation directly drives revenue.
Let's see how all this builds into a real-life financial scenario. Imagine a patient is admitted with shortness of breath. If the doctor just quickly jots down pneumonia in the chart, the coder assigns DRG 195, simple pneumonia without CC/MCC. But if the Clinical Documentation Integrity Team, the CDI team, reviews the chart and prompts the doctor to specify that the patient also has an underlying chronic condition that was actively managed, while the doctor updates the chart to pneumonia with COPD, suddenly that COPD acts as a comorbidity. Boom! The case jumps to DRG 193, simple pneumonia with CC.
And what is the real-world consequence of just adding those 4 little letters? COPD. It is a massive $2,300 revenue increase for a single claim. Or, actually, look at it the other way. Missing that one specific detail causes a $2,300 revenue drop. The hospital expended all the resources to treat this complex patient, but because the documentation was vague, they didn't get credit for the severity of the care they provided. This right here is exactly why hospitals invest so heavily in CDI teams to ensure what we call the ethical optimization of their charts.
Unfortunately, terminology traps are literally everywhere. Vague physician notes constantly force coders to default to those lower-paying buckets. Some of the most common pitfalls: missing the phrase acute on chronic for heart failure, documenting just sepsis when the patient was actually in septic shock, which, by the way, is an MCC. Missing laterality, like whether a hip fracture was on the left or the right side, or just failing to specify if mechanical ventilation lasted more or less than 96 hours. Each and every one of these vague notes acts like a slow leak in the hospital's financial bucket. And that brilliantly brings us to our concluding thought. A direct quote from the core of our source material today: accurate and specific clinical documentation is the lifeblood of the IPDRG system. It truly, absolutely is. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. In a system as vast and as complex as modern healthcare, how incredible is it that the financial survival of an entire hospital can completely hinge on a physician's choice of a single, specific adjective in a patient's medical record? Seriously, think about that the next time you hear about healthcare billing. Thank you so much for joining me to decode the IPDRG system today. If you are enjoying this lesson, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel and share it with friends for this free course on Decode Healthcare with Harshal. Keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next one.